So yes, we should be live. And as I said, we will have a few minutes to chat and to do the introductions before we do the main session. Today, thanks a lot to Dirk for joining us. We will have a presentation on the dynamic API templating with the WireMock State Extension. So this is a new extension created by Dirk. It has been actually requested many times by users, and the key idea is to actually have more global context shared between WireMock stubbing requests and actually being able to exchange all the metadata needed between them. At least this is my plan how to use this extension. And if I'm wrong, if it's not the main use case, I'm looking forward to watching this presentation and making all the corrections.
It pretty much covers it. At least it covers that one as well.
Yeah. So just before we begin, we are streaming to multiple channels, including this one. So if you watch us on YouTube, on LinkedIn, it's basically the same stream. For any questions you ask in the comments, I will be collecting these questions and sending them to Dirk. And also we have a Slack channel. So you can use this Slack channel to actually ask the questions or just provide comments. There is a lot of channels there, including WireMock Java or just help channels so that you can use to ask questions about these extensions when you try them out. And for the discussion, just use general channels so that we can have everything there. So regarding other news, yesterday I was at Devox Belgium, so I still need to unwind a bit, but yeah, it was actually really nice. There were 3 talks on WireMock, so one on WireMock Spring Boot. It was tools in action, but Peter Jean who actually demonstrated the library, the demos, etc. And hopefully we will have the same session on this channel a bit later. The video is already published. Another session was by me and Oleg Shilai from Atomic Jar. So we presented on WireMock test containers, all the integrations, etc. As a part of it, we created a few cool demos you may want to check out. And another one was rather about developer tooling, about release drafter and changelog automation, which we also use in WireMock for our projects. So I think it would be interested for those who actually maintain their own open source projects or who maintain components in WireMock, so that you can use common tooling like release drafter for that. So these are news about the conference. Another important update that we will be likely releasing WireMock 3 announcements today or tomorrow. As you may know, WireMock 3 is already published. There is documentation, etc. But we've been cleaning up the feedback before actually going with bulk announcement, and hopefully it will happen this week. So that are the news from my side. Anything you would like to share, Dirk, before we begin?
No, I'm good.
Okay, then I think we can proceed with the main presentation. Just a second, I will repost the links in the chat. So currently we don't have people watching YouTube, but I see people on Twitter and LinkedIn as well. So let's see how it goes. And actually, yeah, let's get a few more folks. All right. What's going on? I don't even see the live stream on Twitter. Even if it's up. Oh, no, it's actually there. It just takes a few minutes to propagate everything. So this is why we do this introduction. And yeah, just in a few minutes, we will actually start. I think we can go ahead. And so I guess today Dirk will do the presentation. He will do some demos. And then if you have any questions, just ask them. And we will also have some time to discuss WireMock extension development in general and experiences of Dirk. So I'm looking forward to this presentation. And yeah, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And let me take over the screen. So, can you see it?
Just a second. It needs to be. So it's added to the stream, but the content itself hasn't arrived yet.
There it is.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks for giving me the chance to actually present this extension. So as I already mentioned, the idea of the extension is to have a state within a WireMock, which can be transported in between requests, in between stubs, and can be reused so that one step influences the next one. The WireMock extension, I started working on that beginning of June, I think. So it's pretty new, and I actually used the extension framework of WireMock 3 right from the beginning. So you need WireMock 3 for that. I give you a little insight on how it works. Just want to do a quick introduction about myself. My name is Dirk Bolte. I'm working in software development for about 20 years now. I originally started programming C and C++ on microcontrollers and moved over to cloud and cloud backends using initially Ruby, then Java, then Kotlin, worked a little bit on web front ends and actually also touched the mobile devices as well, at least a little bit. But my home turf is really doing backend development in cloud backends using Java and Kotlin. My first exposure to WireMock, I cannot really say for sure who introduced it. Working with some colleagues with the cloud in a product which was deployed in the cloud, and we used that to test the interaction with other services and external devices as well as IoT devices. And at least since 2017, I was using it constantly in various projects. And it served a wonderful purpose all this time. The extension that I wrote, or first going over to the agenda, I was give you a little idea of what was my motivation to actually create this extension, which was that I had the need to actually create a sandbox. And without going too much into the technical details or the history, I will give you a quick demo of what the extension does and how it feels like. And later, then going over the actual features of the extension and how these features progressed over the development of the extension. Giving you a quick introduction of what extension points of WireMock 3 I use for making this extension work, and finishing with a little wish list of what I would like to see or would help me with this extension in WireMock. So what made me create this extension? There were two use cases. One was an idea or something that I observed, and one that actually drove the actual development. The first one was that I worked on one project where next to the actual testing and integration test, there was a need for experiencing the whole application in a deploy state with dynamic input. So users were using a cloud backend with a web front end, mobile devices, and want to actually see what they entered to be reflected without going to the external systems. So the external systems, they didn't have any kind of test setup that could be used. So the one was created, a sandbox was created from scratch, not with WireMock in that case, to actually mimic the behavior of the external systems. And that was one, and the other one was actually a very practical purpose. I was working on a software product which interacted with other services, with other paid services, and we wanted to give our customers or users the opportunity to experience our product in real life but without actually causing any additional costs. So that means like it's something like a trial mode. And the idea was, so this behavior should be really close to the actual behavior. That means if I enter, for example, my name, it should be in there, whatever the name would be. So, and it would should be deployed along with the productive environment. That means it would be a productive part of the software. And the idea was to have a sandbox there, which is a drop-in replacement for the external service. That means as soon as licensing starts, the services switch over to the actual third-party service to make use of it. So that means the API behavior should be the same for the trial run as well as for the actual paid run. And there were two options that we could choose from. And one was to create a full-blown server which re-implements the API and just had some built-in business logic to at least mimic some of the behaviors of the third party that we interacted with. And the other idea was to use mocking, so WireMock. And I thought, okay, actually everything that I need for the service, WireMock already provides. I have a complete web service. I have all APIs there. I can drop in example responses that are in the documentation of the third party, and just have to create a way that actually state is transported from one request to the other. So in this case, it was an identity provider, and typical thing is I enter my name, and in the next request I need this name, or in this request an ID is generated, and with this ID I get additional data. And somehow needed a way to actually create this, and that required state from one request to go over to the other. For example, this ID that I mentioned, so there's a random ID generated, UID, and object ID, and that there's an URL actually active after this random ID is created, where I can fetch my my data afterwards. And I thought about how to and look for a way to create this as WireMock. And I found no extension using this, so I started actually creating this extension. I was lucky that I could actually make this open source afterwards. And this is how this got into the WireMock ecosystem. And how this feels like, I would actually like to demonstrate you, because it is easier to see than actually to explain. So I created various stubs in here. 1 second. So I have various WireMock stubs here in my for WireMock for different API endpoints. And one was, so this example is a plain to-do list, as you see here, with a profile opportunity here. I can enter my data here, I can upload a picture, I can add to-do items, so typical sample application. And what I have created in WireMock are the endpoints for the profile page and the endpoints for the to-do list. And I instrumented them with this extension to behave dynamic. That means whatever I enter on the profile page will be available on the next GET request for the profile page. If I delete something or upload, it will be deleted in there. And same for the to-do list. If I add a to-do list item, it will be available. And if I delete it, it's gone. So that means what I have running here is a complete, where is it? I have a WireMock demo server running here. Let me restart it to make it a clean start. So I have the WireMock Docker container here, which is loading the stub files that I created. And there's no other backend than that. There's no Node.js Java backend running this. This is just WireMock in the backend, and the front end is a Vue.js application. And what I can do here, just an example, I can go into the profile page, add some names. Submit it. Okay, submit it. That was one bug, sorry. I can upload pictures there, like I would do it on a normal demo page or page as well for having a profile. I can add to-do list items. and they are added. So it feels somewhat like an application. So it actually reacts on the dynamic input that I'm creating here. And all that is happening with stubs on the backend. So that means to actually show it to you, you see quite some requests going on in the backend, just to give you a little glimpse on how it looks like in the actual configuration. I have my profile post here that I showed you initially. And in this profile post, I register an event listener, which is meant to record the state. This is the name of the corresponding listener. It fetches data from the incoming request using handlebars, and puts this into the state down here. I give it a context, and this context can be kind of dynamic. I would also be able to have some dynamic in here with handlebars and add whatever I want there. For example, I can generate an idea up here with handlebars with some random functionality, randomness in here. And I can use for the very same ID in the context down here. For this demo, I made it plain simple and just made the context plain string. So what happens underneath is once this post request is going in, all this data is stored in this profile or in the context of this profile, and it's actually a local cache under the covers. Here's the regular response that's coming in, and on the next GET request, where is it? Up here. I'm using request template or response templating again. So again, here we have the handlebars template. The state extension is the one that is adding, or the state command is one that is added by this extension. I specify the profile, the context, and here I'm also able to use dynamics, like, for example, using the ID of the request. I say which property I want to have, what to do when there is none of this. So instead of throwing an exception or reporting an error, there's a default value in there, and the same for all fields in here. And this is thereby, whatever I enter the first time, there will be a different. It will be used in the second request. The same for the image that I uploaded. So the image upload here is just adding another property to the state. It uses the very same context. I record the image type so that I'm able to distinguish between PNG and JPEG and stuff like that. And when I'm getting it again, I'm using the very same data here. So again, here I'm, for example, for the content type, I'm accessing the state extension as well, getting the corresponding context property, and returning it as response. So in here, there's, let's say in one storage, one state that I'm storing. It gets a little bit more difficult when it goes for the to-do list. When I'm posting a to-do list here, I have here again my record state extension, and there's these commands are used to actually add something to a list, and there I'm adding just another list entry, and that means add last means it will be appended to the end of the list. I can have also an add first, so that I can have some kind of option to order it in the list and just add one more entry in there. And when I'm doing a get, where is it? Here's the get. Here's the empty get when I have nothing. So I have a checker there. If there is no, when the context does not exist, it will just return an empty list. Otherwise, it's using this one. So if I have the context, so this is one more checker that I added in this extension. I'm building the response using the this externalized JSON here. And if I go in there, it's using handlebars to actually create a JSON list in here. So again, over the state extension, accessing the corresponding context, getting the list property, so the list that I created, and then iterating over it to actually build the entry of all the things that I added before. And thereby I'm able to create any kind of answer depending on the input that I added before.
Yeah, that's a really nice example, because I knew that it's possible to do rich response templating, but I didn't even think that you can use this context and global storage for uploading bulk files like images. But yeah, it looks pretty well. And then, yeah, constructing complex responses in the code by this extension. So I think the next step would be just adding additional scripting language, maybe with bin shell, to make it even more powerful.
Yeah, definitely. For example, if you look at this, this is yeah, let's say it's easy to it's not that easy to get to that point, and this is something that is not really readable. For example, if you put it into the plain configuration that I have here. That's why I externalized it, because with all the line breaks and everything, it would be just not readable anymore. Yeah, and as you see, I can delete the entries here as well. So just add one and play around, and everything that happens is everything going over WireMock. So the benefit for us was then to actually, the behavior was of the backend was completely dynamic for that. It came from the pure integration testing point of view to actually make it a functional part of the application. So far for the demo, then I would suggest that we go over to the presentation again.
Okay, let's. Yeah, sorry for the background noise. My son decided to check the post. But yes, actually, thanks a lot for the demo, because it answers quite a lot of questions right away about what this extension can do. And maybe a follow-up question is where to find this demo, so if somebody wants to check it out.
Yeah, the demo is part of the repository as well. So if you go to GitHub, one sec. So this is the repository of the extension, and there's the demo directory down here, and there it is. So here's the WireMock State Extension demo. That is the front-end application, and the stubs are the stubs that I just showed you. Here are the mappings and the files. So it's publicly available with it as well.
Okay, thanks a lot for presenting it, and sorry for the interruption.
No worries. So how it started. So my initial use case was to have a plain state. That means coming from this identity providers example, I needed to create an entity using a REST API and fetching the data that I previously entered, maybe with a little extension to that or modification, but more or less when I enter my name, it should be in the response. And being able to lead it, so being able to actually, call delete endpoint and delete a previous state. So this was the initial idea. And to be able to use this multiple times, so if multiple persons are entering their personal data, one should not see the other one. That means I need some kind of randomness, a random ID in there. And that is why I had this context in here in the extension. That means whatever you put in there, whether it will be a static string or a random ID that was generated in the initial post call, that one is used for the context. And within this context, there's a state, and you can have currently it's any kind of JSON that you put in there, or any kind of property that you put in there. That means you can have multiple fields in there. You can I can retrieve the whole properties as a bunch and get a complete JSON out of that. This was the initial one, and including the support for handlebars, because I need to have some kind of randomness in there, access certain explicit fields of the state, which is why I had to create a handlebar extension right from the beginning. Same for any kind of request matches. I needed stable behavior for the case that an ID was not there. Someone did not create an entity. That's why I also need any kind of checkers for checking that a context actually exists. Afterwards, I posted it to WireMock, and I was really happy to see that it was appreciated and accepted pretty fast. Actually, I'm not sure whether it was the same day, but it was like, hey, can you move it over to the WireMock space, and this is where it resides now. And then the first request coming in. Sorry, quick glance, missed that. Just to give you an idea on how this actually looks like. Again, this is more the same code that I showed you before. This is the recording of the actual state. As I said, again, here we have the extension, the record state for storing a state. There's a delete state as well for the counterpart. The parameters are, I want to store a state in here, and then the actual properties or the fields that I'm writing, however I want to write them. I have access to the request, the incoming request, as well as to the response. So here it's request body, and there's also response body. That means I can fetch data from various parts and then fill them however I like them. And profile can be a plain string, or as well, you can have dynamic parts in there using handlebars as well. And this is the response, again, with the extension, with the context and what I showed you before. After having the state and having it published, there came the request from, I'm not sure whether I'm saying the name. So below here is the GitHub ID. The idea, the request was to have something modeled like a queue, being able to mock something like an active queue, RabbitMQ. Something is coming in, I'm fetching the first entered entry and I'm able to delete it. And this is, yeah, it's somewhat similar to a list as well. So I added both functionalities in one shot. Being able to model queues, having an insert first or at last at first, as well as being able to access the whole object or working with that and deleting entries in there. So next to the state, so we can have this context, the very same context as concept as before. We still have the state, which is somewhat mutable. That means if I, even the previous example, change a property on the next call, then it will be just overwritten. Now, next to that, in parallel, there's the list, and everything entered when creating at last is something like an immutable state. So this one cannot be modified directly, at least not at that point, and just added to the list there. That means I can have multiple states added there after each other. So every time I call at last, it will be a new one will be appended to the list. And this is how it looks like. Again, same extension, it's a record state. Previously, we had this state in here. Now it's called list. And underneath, there are multiple commands like at last, at first, where I can just add additional states, and the syntax down here is the very same. So again, I can have used JSON handlebars to create my own contents in there. And here's another example which uses the actual response body instead of the request body in the previous example. But in the end, it's the same. I have access to the same entities for building that. And this is now a little bit not so readable, phrase it like this, example to actually build a JSON list with that. Handlebars is pretty powerful to actually build whatever you want. And here I just have a for each loop, which accesses the context, takes the property that I'm filling here with this list. And for every entry, this is now iterating over it. I have to do a little magic down here to actually add the comma to every item, but not the last, so that it's a valid JSON. But beside that, it's now iterating over everything. And that also means that this property is available to everything that you do with handlebars. That means if there is another extension or another command in handlebars that you can use and they can post in a property, you can just use the very same.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. And basically, it allows to emulate different types of queues in the future, right? Because so since we have global state, it's concurrent. So let's say if there are multiple requests coming in, then basically it would be concurrent too. And if someone wants to build advanced functionality on that, I think there would be a few capabilities to extend.
Yes. So currently, the way that the extension is built, there are some limitations. I'm not sure how this is actually working with an HA cluster with WireMock. There are some. If it works with one WireMock instance, I have some type of locking in there. That means the state can only be read or modified once at a time to prevent any kind of race conditions. So that limits the amount of parallelization with this extension, but I mean, this is also not built for high throughput at this point.
And yeah, maybe it's a bit hardcore question, but yeah. So in WireMock 3, there is actually an extension point for storing state outside of WireMock instance itself. So when you were developing this extension, did you leverage this extension point?
I didn't. What I did was, I think there's the store interface that I'm using. So it means you can just, when you initiate this extension, you can put in any kind of store that you want to. And in the default implementation is Caffeine that I'm using. So a plain cache. So frankly, you can put a Redis in there if you want. It should work as well. Maybe you have to tweak a little bit, but currently it's a plain key value store. The reason for using Caffeine is I wanted to have something with expiration, because if I actually put this into a product, the data that users will put in there should not be in there forever. So I created one version with Caffeine which expires with cache entries expiring after 1 hour, just to have an automatic cleanup.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
So after this request when coming from to build something like a queue, there was quite more things requested. So for example, Alexandre Chopin requested to be able to create default values. So this is the default equals and whatever is behind there that you saw. So because previously there were just errors written in there in the responses, so the request still worked, but the response was not really digestible for any kind of client. Along with that, also exposed the list property that you saw to handlebars to actually be able to iterate on it. And there were various minor extensions, like seeing how many times a property was updated, seeing how many entries are in the list, being able to access the property or list property as its own to actually make it usable in handlebars, being able to delete a single property. So for example, if I now have this first name, for example, I want to delete this first name there, that it's just not there anymore, being able to do so was added as well. This is majorly used in the demo for deleting the image. So I can delete the image without deleting the whole context. And also being able to load the whole extension in WireMock standalone and in Docker container, which required some additional efforts to that. Going over to where you can see all this. So I created a README with some examples, which I'm afraid that it's a little lengthy meanwhile. So if there are any suggestions on how to improve it, it's more than welcome. But as code tells you more than actually written pro, there's the repository. Let me show you. The repository contains, next to the README that you see down here, with the actual data structure visualized, some use cases, and some special edge cases. There's also in the source directory tests. There are some examples down here for test cases with a little description in the beginning as well, and giving you an idea on how you can actually use this extension, what is possible with it. And the demo that I just showed you. So the demo is in the repository as well. So if you want to see how it feels like as a full application, you can just have a look at the demo and get inspiration from that. So from this one.
Yeah. Thank you. So if anyone on the stream has questions, please ask in the chat or in the comments. Meanwhile, I have a few more questions. And first of all, Dirk, thanks a lot for the presentation and for the extension, because it's a great content. The extension is actually super helpful for so many cases. Last week, we were presenting a kind of to-do list manager co-development with Spring Boot and WireMock. And now looking at this extension, I realized that I should have included this extension right inside the demo. Because then we could have modeled quite a lot of other things and presented the very nice use cases. So for the extension, one of the common questions, does it actually support being run in WireMock standalone, or is it just a part of the Java library?
It can be bundled with WireMock standalone as well. So I expressly created the deploy type for that, and it's manually tested for it like this, but it's actually used in this demo as well. So the demo that I'm using, let me go over to that. The demo that I'm using is I just started it over IntelliJ. Let me show you. It has some bind mounts, and this bind mount has actually the build directory of this project in there. So it's actually loading the extension from that. And if I'm going into the build directory here in the libs directory, there's a standalone extension. So this is all bundled. It's using Shadow Jar to actually, have it contain everything, and you saw it live or you experienced it live.
Yeah. So based on that, so one could take a WireMock extension, let's say for WireMock standalone in Docker. Then they could have packaged these configuration files, also included the extension, and then they could have got a model of the entire backend with storage, etc. And with the state extension, actually, you don't care whether there is a database under the hood or not, because you can, by WireMock, you can actually emulate some behavior and sequences, even if, without a real database inside.
Yes.
Yeah, that's quite cool.
Thanks.
Yeah. And actually, this is maybe one of ideas for somebody who's interested in contributing to WireMock. As you know, there is Hacktoberfest. We're looking for contributions, and maybe creating some or such advanced demos here and there would be actually a good idea for that. Speaking of that, if somebody wanted to contribute to the project, what would be your suggestions? How to get started? What are the things to look at?
You mean from a developer point of view, if you want to contribute, or when you want to use it?
From the contributor standpoint. So basically everything, documentation, demos, features, anything you have in mind.
What I'm really looking for is more feedback and seeing whether it's usable and what is missing. So whether, for example, is the README actually understandable? Does it help? That is one. Also, my use case was very narrow on REST APIs with CRUD operations, listing, stuff like that. there's nothing for building SOAP or so, and be actually having examples and maybe corrections to make it work with SOAP, and there would also be an idea. Whatever kind of other protocol that you're using. I'm wondering what kind of what is possible when we combine this with other extensions? What can we build out of this? That might be also a very interesting point. This is now, let's say, a little bit of a wild duck idea. We have WireMock has quite some APIs ready to use, or API templates ready to use for common services like X or others, or Facebook, I think, as well. And I'm wondering how we can combine these two approaches with each other, so that we build something which actually feels more like a real X or real Facebook, so that a tweet that I'm posting is actually available right away, so that we combine these two.
Yeah, I think it would be a really good addition. And in fact, I created a few tickets for gRPC and GraphQL integrations. So both interfaces actually have quite a lot of existing service implementations. So if you're interested to tinker with it, I think it should be quite straightforward. You take two extensions, launch them, try to configure things, and then if it works well, yeah, it's a good source for the demo. So I think that, yeah, it would be really interesting to demonstrate more. Yeah, and apart from feedback, do you see any other features you would like to implement in this library, or where would you like to get some help?
Personally, I'm pretty happy with the current feature set, but that is just my very personal view on that. What I would like to have help, feedback, what any kind of contribution to is actually make the configuration of the extension better. It feels a little bit cumbersome to actually configure it. It feels like in some areas I'm working around JSON and stuff like that. And to have contributions on how to make it smoother, nicer to configure, nicer to work with, that would be great as well.
Yeah. So in my case, one use case I constantly think about is mocking OpenSearch, Elasticsearch, because yeah, when you operate at scale, it's quite complicated, and actually these services have, from one side, quite good APIs, especially if you use GraphQL adapters. On the other hand, if you use classic REST APIs, it actually has stateful API because it has cursors that you need to implement.
Okay.
And when I was thinking, when I saw this extension first time, for me, one of the good use cases was to actually create a support for such cursors that would be just an integer that could be stored, but at the same time, it's crucial that this integer is actually safe in terms of concurrency, because yeah, the request, when you use OpenSearch client, it can actually iterate and send the request in parallel despite the cursor. And if you support this behavior, I think that it would be a really good addition. So
that
this
should
is
actually work.
So it should work, right?
I have a locking on the, yeah, it's a plain Java log, so there's nothing fancy behind it. So it's a plain synchronized calls. If you have one WireMock instance, but reading and editing the context should be atomic. And thereby actually having multiple parallel requests and the cursor incrementing over that should actually work. And if
yeah,
not,
but
it's
it's
a bug,
not
so
just
please
read
report it.
and modify, because you need well, read modify operation to be atomic.
Yeah, that should actually, it should work. But wait. Actually, it's not. It's atomic on the actual context, not on the complete request. That actually, you're right. That might be actually. We have to look into that.
Yeah. Well, again, a good example for creating something. Yeah, and thanks a lot. So one thing I wanted to mention for those who watch this presentation, again, we have a Hacktoberfest going on, and as a part of this Hacktoberfest, there is a lot of demand in different demos, documentations, extensions. So what we discussed today is actually quite a good opportunity to try out these months and maybe just demonstrate the things. So if you don't find that, maybe I'll just share my screen for a second.
Sure.
Okay. So yeah, I think it's okay. Now it's visible, I guess. Yeah. So if you go to WireMock website, not this website actually. There is quite a lot of things available, but yeah, what I wanted to present is this page, which describes how to participate in Hacktoberfest and how to find these issues. And one thing I wanted to mention that is actually, if you go to the issue search on this page, you can already see that there are some items created for WireMock extension state. And if you have a few more ideas, just go there, create patches. We will also have some newcomer-friendly issues. So if you're interested in participating, get special swag, this extension, I think it could be a really good target, as well as all the ecosystems and integrations around it. And what I've just thought about is that since we have this library site, maybe it's actually a good time to think about including something into this library that would specially depend on the extension as a part of the demo. So for example, if you have a service that really needs this stateful behavior to operate even for the basic scenarios, I think that it's a good time to actually add an example for this service right to the template library, which we could reuse for the demos. And it could be also used as a source for improvement for this website, because right now, for example, if you go here, there is no declared requirements, but we can extend it, say that this particular stub requires state extension, how to get it. But yeah, if there is a service that could be modeled, I think that we could add this information right on the template. And again, it could be a good opportunity for contributions. Do you have any services of such kind in mind that could be actually extended like that?
I mean, frankly, if you don't go for the X example, seeing the tweets that you posted and going through your stream, that would be one.
Yeah.
Something that is present in the areas that I work in is identity management. So if you have if you are mocking, for example, an OpenID server, you can have data in there that the email address that you entered is actually present in the user info, for example, on part of the token as well. The very same with any kind of commercial service that you're using. So as I said, the original use case was to connect to identity providers. So if you're using them and mocking their API to have your identity verified, having some behavior in there as well, that might be one use case. And they're usually offering REST APIs and pretty decent documentations on the web, and being able to make this dynamic would be one. That might be very special, but it's just something that I was working with for quite a while.
Well, I think this is a perfectly valid example. Another one I could think of is actually integration for Logstash, because again, I'm going to open search use case, or to be honest, I don't even remember how a fork of Logstash is called and whether there is. But the point is that when you use log streaming to OpenSearch, actually the structure is quite fixed in terms of where it goes, how the data is structured. So maybe one of potential use cases for users would be actually trying to mimic this behavior. So this is, and in such a case, my use case about counters could be validated, and it could be actually quite a good example for those who store the data in OpenSearch for logging purposes and for evaluation, because you can just put a sample log there and extract it so that your integration service can retrieve things quickly. So another good example, I think.
Yeah.
So for me, yeah, there are no other questions I could see in the chat. Yeah, as I mentioned on Twitter, it's a kind of morning show. It's not a normal time for those who join live, but thanks to everyone who watched online and who watches the recording. So this is an extension you definitely want to try out. This is definitely an extension that I would like to use as a showcase, for example, for embedding the extension to WireMock Docker distribution right away, maybe for doing some additional package management and recommendation, because we are thinking about having a new WireMock extension site. I have a prototype I created yesterday, so hopefully it will be published soon. So I think that this is great to have this extension. And thanks again, Dirk, for creating one.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah. So thanks everyone who watched us. And yeah, any closing words?
I'm happy to get any kind of feedback. So looking forward to hearing from you.
Yeah. Thanks for that. And just a second, I will embed the link for sharing the feedback. And one thing to mention that if you use GitHub issues, we have template embedded, so you can easily submit bugs, feature requests, ideas there. And if you have any ideas what could be done better, please share it because yeah, I think it's super important for everyone to actually get more information and get more use cases for that. So thanks everyone, and yeah. We will see each other maybe in a week or so, because I'm planning another short notice webinar. So stay tuned. And if you want to share your use cases, your presentations, please drop a message on Slack. I would be happy to host whether you're an end user for WireMock, whether you're a developer, if you want to open source and publish your extension. We know that there are a bit more than 300 private source extensions. Because yeah, if you enable WireMock to share logs, etc., we actually see that just on GitHub that there are some extensions referenced. So having some of these extensions published, I think it would be really good. Okay, thanks everyone, and see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.